Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Am I for Change? I am your host, Dr. Monica Gilbert, and today we're going to shake it up a little bit and do things a little differently. I have the most asked questions that I've gathered from the conferences I've been invited to speak in, from the webinars I've done, from just speaking with other clinicians all around. So I've gathered the most asked questions. There's probably other asked questions as well. So if you have any questions after this, please put it on the comments and I'll try to make a part two. So I wanted to make this a little more fun. So for those of you who are watching, you will see it. For those of you who are listening in, I gathered the questions and I wrote them down on a piece of paper and I folded it. And I'm going to pick one by one randomly and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. I like to work in organized chaos. So I think this will make it a little more fun. So let's start with the questions. So here are my questions. Let's see. All right, let's start with this one. It says, how do I use reflections if I don't want to sound repetitive or therapist-y? I get this question a lot. For those of us who haven't taken really any counseling courses, it's a little difficult to use reflections, although I have met a lot of clinicians that just use reflections naturally. They're just born using them. But for those of us, including myself, it may come a little harder to use these reflections. And again, just a brief reminder, when we are reflecting, we are saying, repeating, paraphrasing what the client is telling us. And sometimes we are going under the waterline. We are trying to dig into and really look at those nonverbals. What do they mean by what they're saying? And that makes it a little bit difficult, and sometimes you may get it wrong. And as I've said before, that's absolutely okay. So, how do you use reflections when it sounds fake? Or how do you use reflections so they don't sound repetitive? So, the first thing is don't repeat the same beginning phrase. For example, I see a lot of people use it sounds like. It sounds like is perfect for coming up with a reflection, but you can imagine that if you use that, overuse it during a session, it can sound really redundant. It sounds like, it sounds like, it sounds like, or it seems like, or what I see. So try to mix it up a lot. The other part of using reflections is that you want to listen to what the person is saying. And sometimes a reflection can be something as simple as, that sounds frustrating. So all you're doing is reflecting on what they are saying, what they mean. I can see how that can really put you in this predicament. Or it makes you feel annoyed when other people are saying this about your son. So these are some examples of reflections. And again, I think that sometimes, and this tends to happen more to women, I think. This is like not empirically based statement, but we tend to always follow up with a question. We want to make sure that what we are saying is correct, or we need that reassurance. It also happens for people that just need reassurance in general. I do this all the time and I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to just stop this because it has become a habit where I am simply reflecting and then I follow up very quickly with a question. So it doesn't allow that reflection to land on that client. For example, the other day I was working with a client and I said something along the lines of, it's annoying that that other people say that about your son. I wonder what, and blah blah blah. And then I asked the question, and I should have just reflected and just dropped it there, because once you add the question, then it steers the conversation to another way, to another topic. So definitely get in the habit of just throwing the reflections and just allowing them to stay there, stay in that moment with the client. That is the best way to not sound repetitive or to not sound like you're overusing them or like you're rushed to use reflections. All right, let's See, the next question: what if a parent says, I don't have time for that? In today's society, none of us have time for anything, right? It's a rush society. And I've had parents in the past that I am providing parent coaching for, or I'm trying to even schedule a parent coaching session. And they're like, look, I'm really busy. I don't have time for that. What does that mean? And I've said it in the past podcasts that we have to become better at when we get a resistant statement to ask ourselves, where is this coming from? What are they really telling me that they're not really saying? So when a parent tells me that, what I think is they either don't find value in the parent coaching session, they don't think it's going to make a difference. Maybe they just feel awkward having the parent training session because they don't know what it looks like. So there's different reasons why they may be resisting. Time is not one of them. I think we all make time and we prioritize the things that are important. So as clinicians, our job is to add value to the service, add value to that parent coaching session. What is the parent going to get from this parent coaching session? Make it valuable for them. How do we know what's valuable for them? Well, we ask. We ask them, how could I make this worth your time? I know you have 20 minutes. How could it be worth that time? I know you're very busy and I really want it to work. What would you like to go over? And that's it. Asking that question makes all the difference because now the client feels like they have the control because ultimately they do. And you are bringing value that they are going to be more open to listening to. All right. Third question: how can I use MI without sounding fake? So, this is very similar to the first question I answered. And what I always say is if it sounds fake, don't do it. Don't force yourself to do something that sounds fake. However, that doesn't mean that you can't work on making it better, on improving it. So, using open ended questions or even using affirmations. I've heard that a lot of therapists experience difficulties using affirmations because they don't want to sound like they're downgrading the parent, or they don't want to sound silly, and they just don't know how to use affirmations. So again, if you feel uncomfortable use it, it's best that you don't. And perhaps you can practice with a colleague, do role plays, get consultations from people that are in the MI world that can help you. I've had consultations from someone in the MI world that has really helped me. If you go to the Mint website, in the Mint website you will find members of Mint that are ready to give supervision session and consultations, and hopefully very very soon I will be part of that membership as well. But that is a resource that I will also add here so you guys have it. But get consultation, get better at it. Don't just let it stay there. All right, next. How to handle parents who agree at the moment but don't follow through. That is a good one. And we can also relate it to clients that we're working with. Sometimes we have clients that were like, hey, I have this exercise plan for you. I have this dietary plan for you. And they're like, oh my gosh, it sounds perfect. I'm totally going to do it. They come back next session. How did it go? Oh, I wasn't able to do it. I didn't have time. Things got in the way. All of this sustained talk. And they just didn't do it. And then the next session, same thing. And then you're a month in and you're still in block one and you're like, okay, how do I get out of here? So this definitely can make a therapist feel frustrated and a little, I guess, blocked and also confused as to why the parent or why this client is saying, I'm going to do it, yet they don't follow through. So like everything in motivational interviewing, when you have a resistance statement or when you have these situations that are a little confusing, the best way to tackle them is communication. So have a conversation about that. I would say something like, you mentioned that you really wanted to start tackling these behaviors because they're causing you a lot of stress. And you also have not been able to do it for the last 3 months. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So here you are expressing your concern and leaving the door open, and you are highlighting both parts of that ambivalence. Let's say the parent says, "Oh, it's just been really hard. I just haven't had time to do it." Okay, so something you can say is, "Well, I want to make sure that the things we work on in sessions are things that are one valuable and things that you will also be able to do." So, what is something that you can do along the lines of what we've already spoken about, the interventions or the behavior plan or whatever it is? What is something that you feel like you are capable to do? And when do you think you would be able to do it? So, there you're putting it back on the client, and they will tell you what they're able to do and how long it's going to take and come up with their own deadlines. And something that I would also suggest is talk about the challenges. Play devil's advocate. So let's say they're going to work on creating this token system. Say, okay, perfect. Let's create this token system. I'll kind of help you and you'll create it and we will partner up and do it together. Now, what happens if you get home after soccer practice, after work, after all these things, and you're just tired and you just don't find the time to do it? So I know that I've said that we shouldn't stay in the sustained talk. You don't want to get too much of that during the session, but you also want to be realistic about these challenges. And when you bring up these challenges and you tackle them and you problem solve, then it will allow you to really get more feasible responses that are closer to that change that you want to see in that client, in that parent. But again, when there's a discrepancy between what the client is telling you they're going to do and what they're doing, bring it up. Bring it up in a nice conversation using open ended questions, affirmations, reflection, all of these different skills. Okay, next question. What do I do when my supervisee says, "I've tried it, but it didn't work"? So, what if you are working with an intern, with a supervisee, with an RBT, and you know that this intervention is going to work because you've tried it with this kiddo, you already know the function, you know it's going to work, but they kind of cut you mid sentence, and as you're explaining this intervention they're like, "Oh, I've already tried that, it's not going to work." So what do? Do you scream at them? Do you yell at them? Do you tell them to, like, you're going to report them to the ethics board? No, you don't do any of that. Again, you have a conversation. You invite them to have a conversation. So I've noticed that every time that I come up with an intervention for you to use, you tell me that you have used it and it just doesn't work. First, can you show me how you've used this intervention? I'm just curious to see how you are using it, and perhaps we can tweak it together and see if it does really work. Or second, you can say something along the lines of, um, "I've noticed that we've been talking about this and you continue to mention that it's not going to work. You know your child best since you work with them every day, all day. So, what are some things that we can do differently? What are some things that you do think will work? Or what is a way that you can run this intervention in a way where it will be successful?" Okay, so see that last part? That's like agreeing with a twist. So it's not that I'm saying we're just going to put this intervention in the garbage, but let's tweak it a little bit. How do you think it will work? And then we are pushing that conversation towards that change. Okay, next question. How can I be empathetic when I'm frustrated and burnt out? So I'm sure a lot of us feel this way sometimes, if not a lot of the times. How can you be empathetic when your own needs are not being met? Well, the quick answer to that is you can't. You have to put the mask on before you put it on the other person. So you have to help yourself before you are able to help others. So if you're at that point where you are already feeling burnt out, then perhaps it's a good idea to step back a little bit. If you're working with a family that is just causing you all of this frustration, then stepping back and just allowing someone else to come in and help in the meantime, or just taking a break, whatever it is you need to do to just improve that well-being of yours, because that is the number one thing. We can't fake empathy. I think we all know that. And if you are frustrated, it is a little incompatible to feeling empathy for this person. You can't really feel frustrated and feel empathy. You could feel one day and then the other day, but it's really hard to feel at the same time. Anyways, so that would be my first recommendation. Take care of that burnout. Now, the reason why I decided to start speaking about motivational interviewing in the ABA field is because there is a lot of burnout in our field. We carry a lot on our shoulders, and I want to help clinicians feel lighter, not feel that burden of responsibility always lies on them, because it doesn't. We have to take our responsibility for the session, but also give the parent or the client their responsibility of the session, which also involves decision making. So these skills, these communication tactics are geared so you don't get to that point where you are burnt out. Because once you get to that point, you have to take care of that. And once you do take care of that and you come again into the field with the client or you work with other clients, it's using these different techniques so that you prevent that burnout from coming and that frustration. Are you going to feel frustrated? Absolutely. We're always going to have moments where we feel frustrated. But again, it's recognizing that and speaking about it. And if you don't feel not even a little ounce of empathy for the client, you can't work with them. For example, as a psychologist, there are a lot of different, I guess, populations that I just can't work with. So I just to kind of self-disclose here, I have other colleagues that work with pedophiles, for example. I can't. I have kids and I'm not going to feel empathy and I'm going to do a disservice to the client. I rather they see a therapist that does have more of that empathy. Do I have empathy for them as a human being? Of course, but I just know that it's going to be very difficult for me to have that empathy long term. So I don't put myself in those positions. So again, it's understanding that and understanding and acknowledging these things about yourself that helps. All right, next. Well, I already read that one. Okay. Can MI actually help parents who are in denial about their child's diagnosis? So I actually had a couple weeks ago a parent who came in, and it was the mom and the father came in together. And I've been doing this for about 17, 18 years. I've been in the field of ABA, in the mental health field. And the child comes in, and I see the child. He doesn't provide any eye contact. He runs in, he starts looking for letters and starts putting the letters where they go, and just all of these check marks of symptoms of autism. So I sit with the parents and I'm here just speaking with them and asking them questions. And these parents have no idea. I already know in the beginning of sessions when I'm probing and asking some questions, some developmental questions, that they either have no idea or they are suppressing the idea of their child having autism. So at first I thought, well, I don't think they see it. And the mom comes in and she's like, well, I was a neuropsychologist in my country, blah, blah. Um, and then we start having the conversation. And as I start asking questions, I start to see how she becomes a little uncomfortable. So when I ask about repetitive behaviors, about lining up toys, about nonsensical speech and things like that, you can tell from her nonverbals that she's becoming a little uncomfortable. So I stopped and I brought it up and I said, Mom, I see that I perceive that every time that I bring up this topic or these kind of questions, you become I'm not sure, but is it a little uncomfortable or a little curious about what I'm asking for? Please feel free to ask me the questions that you have. So mom went ahead and she said, yeah, I think you're categorizing him as being in the spectrum, but I know my son is not in the spectrum. He is absolutely not in the spectrum. This is typical. I'm a neuropsychologist and on and on. So during that session, my goal wasn't for the parents to come out of it saying, oh my gosh, he does have autism. But I did want to continue to ask certain questions to plant the seed. And I noticed also that the parent just wasn't ready to go there. And when I noticed that, I stopped. I slowed it down, and we just spoke about things in general, right? Because if I would have forcefully come in there and said, I think your child's on the spectrum, let's go, let's get him diagnosed, let's get him therapy, that's what he needs, they would have rushed out of there. They probably would have yelled at me, and then they would have ran out of the session. And that's not what I want. I didn't want them to have a bad experience from that session and never want to come back, because looking at their profile, I think that that's what they probably would have done. So fast forward, parents left, and 2 weeks later, mom calls me and she's like, "Hey, I know you were recommending that we do this psychological evaluation. Um, I still don't think my son is in the spectrum, but let's do it." That was what I was looking for. I wanted at least for her to be open to doing a psychological evaluation. So we still haven't done the feedback, and that's going to be interesting when I have to sit there and go over it. But I think what helped me navigate this very difficult situation was knowing about motivational interviewing, knowing how far I could go, or if I could, go in and out. And motivational interviewing, there is a metaphor of when you are having conversations with a client, it's a dance. It's a dance that you're dancing with them. So if any of you have danced salsa or any type of dance, you know that you have to put your foot forward, the other person puts it back, and then they put it forward. So you have to gauge as to how quickly they're dancing, because if not, you're going to step on their foot. You have to have that coordination. When we're having these conversations, we have to have that coordination as well, because we don't want to push too much if you already start seeing these resistant behaviors in the client. I'm not sure if I responded to that question, um, but I hope that I did. I think it was this question of how do you help parents if they're in denial? And some observations that I can share with you is a lot of the times when parents come in, if it's not court mandated, of course, but a lot of the times when parents come in to see a psychologist, I already know that there is a suspicion of something. Something isn't right. So they're not necessarily in denial. They may be suppressing the idea of, I think my child is in the spectrum, or perhaps they have another neurodevelopmental disorder or something else, but they're not completely in denial. There's a reason why they come to see me. And a lot of the people that come to see me know what I've been doing for years and know what I'm known for, which is autism and ADHD. So when you are referred to me, there's something there. There's a reason why you're coming in. So I think that that is very powerful to see it that way. There's a reason why this client is coming into therapy at the moment. There's a reason why parents picked up the call and wanted to receive services. There's always a reason. And it's interesting to ask the why. So what brings you here today? Tell me what happened that brought you into the session, or kind of drove you into calling for a session. All right, let's take a look at the next question. How do I know that I'm not just enabling the client? This is a good question, because another follow up question is, when do we call it quits? Which I think is actually the last question that I have here. But how do you know that you aren't enabling the client? So, if a client is engaging in a very destructive behavior, maybe substance use or substance misuse, or perhaps it's a parent that continues to reinforce a child's behavior, how do we know that we're not siding too much with them and not really moving them towards change? So, that's an easy and complicated question, just because it really depends on the client. When if you've been, or if you've heard about the four processes of motivational interviewing, I've spoken about that in past episodes. I've done webinars on it. It's really important to go through those phases, and that is a way to outline what happens next. There is an engagement process where we are engaging with that client, and that is the first step. we definitely have to engage with that client. After we engage with them, though, there has to be change. We have to feel like we are moving them towards change, like they are engaging in more change talks. So, one way that you can see if this is working and not just enabling the client is, are they producing more change talk statements than sustained talk statements? And if they aren't, then you have to reword your questions and you have to start asking the right questions. One question that I always use is the ruler method, where you are using a, sort of like a Likert scale. You're saying from 1 to 10, how confident do you feel in tackling this behavior right now? So that's a good way to measure where are we going and to slightly push that conversation towards change. The last question is, when is it time to call it quits? So, do we just talk forever? Are we just having these conversations and just staying in the pre contemplation stage forever? Absolutely not. That's not what we came to do. I have spoken about the trans theoretical model of change. And I think something interesting about that model is that, and if you go to my past episodes and you listen to it, it talks about what to do in each of those stages. So if we are in the pre-contemplative stage, which an example are the parents that came to see me, they were probably in the pre-contemplative stage, although dad was more in the contemplative stage. So what does the client need in that stage? They just need you to plant the seed and leave the door open. If they're in the contemplative stage, this is where they're like, well, maybe, but I'm not really ready to go there yet. You will use other interventions in that phase, and so on and so forth. The most important thing is understanding where your client is. Now, if you've been stuck on the pre contemplative phase, you've gone to consultations, you've gone supervision about motivational interviewing, you know you're doing it right, and they're just there, then maybe they're just not ready, and that is okay. We don't all have to be ready to change right now. So the client may not be ready. And again, having a conversation with them about this. So we've been talking about this intervention, mom, for the or dad, for the past 6 months. And I haven't really seen that you have made an attempt to start it. Do you think that you're ready for this service? Do you think that this is the right time, or do you think we should pause and then come back at a later time? So it's okay to do that. I've done that with parents in the past where they're just like, look, this makes sense. I love this. It makes sense. I trust you. I get it. But too much is going on. Like, we have to worry about our mental health. We have to go to soccer practice, baseball practice, whatever it is. We just, it's just really hard. And I've told them it's okay. Let's pause. And when you are ready, I will be here for you. So I want you guys to take that home with you today, that there's no rush, and always go alongside the client, walk with them. You shouldn't be walking ahead of them, coming up with all these solutions for them, but measure it in terms of how ready they are to make that next step. They will let you know in their conversations, in their behaviors, and then you are going to follow in with them. I hope you guys found value in this episode of MI. And again, if you have any questions that you want me to answer, I can definitely do a part two. Just put the questions here and I would love to respond to them. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of MI for Change. If you're ready to keep growing your motivational interviewing skills, I'd love to invite you to explore my MI Academy, where you'll find a full library of on-demand courses designed to help you put MI into practice with confidence. You can learn more at www.drmonicagilbert.com. Until next time, keep asking the questions that spark change.